Today on Future Cities Africa, I speak with Henning Rasmuss. Henning has co-founded Paragon Architects in 1997 and is a founding director of all the companies in the Paragon Group. He's responsible for all the group's international projects and for business development in Africa. In this conversation, we talk about the impact of COVID-19 and potential future outbreaks on his industry and what picture he sees for future cities in Africa. Henning, thanks a lot for chatting to me. Perhaps you can talk a bit more just about the Paragon Group and all the activities that you manage there.
So as you said, we started this company about now almost 23 years ago. It's always been based in Johannesburg. We now have an office in Cape Town. We looked at African office establishments for quite a few years, but it's not an easy thing to do, to go and learn in your 40s how to produce electricity in Lagos to keep your office doors open. So we're a South African based company, but I'm much better at languages than I am at mathematics. So I can do cultural things and teach myself languages quite easily. So I've always done the international work that was offered to us or that came to us or that we've gone after. So I'm an architect by training. The Paragon Group has an architecture and an interiors business, Paragon Interface. And we've had that business since 2002. And we are a generalist business. In the South African market, you can't specialize. And in the African market also, you can't really specialize because any one property sector is always quite small. So we've always been a generalist business that works in just about all property sectors and designs just about all building types. Maybe the one thing we haven't done at a proper level is hospitals and airports. But other than that, we've successfully designed many building types. We had an office in Brazil for about 6 years. I think at the moment we're happy that we're not in that market, but we've never afraid to grow our business. So I have personally worked in 23 countries on this continent on architecture and interior projects. We've built projects in 18 of those countries, and this continues. And the fortunes of the African property industry are obviously always very closely tied to resources, and often it gets busy when the easy money flows, and the easy money comes from resources. And now we are in a health crisis. At the moment, nothing's flowing. So here we are.
Yes, so which actually brings me on to my first question, and it is about the health crisis because it is what everyone's talking about at the moment. So I want you to picture yourself lying in bed, sleeping, obviously, and having a very bad nightmare. What is your worst nightmare for your industry from this pandemic?
Well, the worst nightmare is that in our limited economies, it really pushes things over the edge, that the consumer industry collapses, that we end up with massive unemployment and massive debt. I think the massive debt is coming. We're signing up for it right now across the continent. But I think the worst outcome can be that the management of this crisis pushes countries like South Africa over the edge socially, and that we end up with poor people really burning the house down because they finally had enough. They've been treated very badly, and this crisis is putting the poor who have very limited choice under more pressure. So the risk of this thing exploding the social stresses is, I think, my biggest nightmare. And we don't know how to manage this, so there's very little precedent. And that would mess up many things, not just our industry. I think the risk is real. If you look at the anger across the continent, I think there's a real risk that anger will boil over and that things will become unmanageable.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't want to be quoted on a recorded interview, but you just need some looting to start and something to go wrong, and you have a Marikana type incident where our army shoots our citizens, and enough of them on an afternoon with a lack of control and bad training, and this thing is going to lead to a political meltdown and an explosion of anger. So that's not me as an architect talking, that's me as a citizen. And we are already a very angry society. There's a lot of people who get a bad deal in South Africa, in the old and the new one. The question of numbers of people dying from COVID is, well, I can't say it's something that doesn't worry me, because it could be me and my friends, but I don't think the number of deaths from the disease is the worrying thing. People will die or they won't, but the management of the crisis is bringing pressure to bear that parts of our society and parts of our economy will not be able to take. That's the answer.
Do you think this is kind of the cause of the end of rapid urbanization, at least for the short term?
Look, I think urbanization has a large number of drivers, and I don't think especially poorer people with less choice are going to now get worried about distancing and density. I think that the drivers of urbanization are global. They have to do with, well, there's also displaced people, then there's water shortages, then there's the environmental meltdown of the world, which is driving urbanization. Then it's, I think there are powerful vested interests behind global agriculture that force people off land, maybe not in South Africa, but in other countries. So the way that the global food system has been manipulated and set up by global agro corporates is a force driving people into cities. So I think maybe for a very short time, some people will be nervous about cities, but actually cities are still the great opportunity provider. If you look at what's happening in India, where like many, some say hundreds of millions of day laborers are being forced out of cities and back to their so-called villages. I think as a management tool, it's crass. I don't know all the details, but it sounds like a horrendous solution to a temporary problem. People come to cities because they offer life. You can also die there, but I don't think, I think many things are going to have to change to stop urbanization and the trend to living in cities. But there are political and societal changes. And I think with the kind of super corporations we have and political interests across the world, we're not going to de-urbanize.
And is there a specific belief that you had about the future of our cities in South Africa and in Africa that has now been changed or altered, or has this maybe confirmed a specific belief that you had that maybe other people didn't agree with you on?
Look, maybe on the let me start at a local level, maybe not at T level. We have discussed or argued with clients this thing about how many people can work at home and how much hot desking you can do and how much you can change company culture by temporary workspace without the culture of a company falling apart. And even in our company, we've been going, oh, like work from home, maybe that works, but not for everybody. And now all of a sudden we can all work from home well enough because we have to. So certainly some debates and the kind of, let's say, presentations we sat in our interior business, sort of discussing with clients whether 11 or 15% of your workforce should be planned as hot desks before people get all nervous about not having a workplace with a photo of their dog on the desk and feel alienated. I think all of that's out of the window, and one can almost laugh about the kind of discussions which were meticulous and founded on nothing much other than personal opinions. And all of a sudden we find that when we have to, a lot of us can all work at home, at least when we have desk jobs. But look, I think the realization that we can all do with less is really going to stick with us. We don't need all this choice. We don't need all this entertainment. We don't need all these services. We don't need all this stuff. At the moment, we're all under pressure. But I think rich and poor people have realized that they can live differently, and maybe they need more convenience. Maybe they need less convenience. Maybe we just all want to be more serviced or have better functioning servicing, but not have places where things are carried out. I find it fascinating, and I've never been I've never been very interested in sport, but I find it fascinating that sport is just not happening. And in fact, none of us, I mean, personal health is a different thing, but competitive sport and sporting events and this huge global thing of us watching people run around stadiums and tracks beating other people, I've always thought it's pretty pointless. And to me, COVID has proven that maybe we never needed sports. Like, who is actually interested in it enough? Because now that we can't do it, nobody's dying. A couple of sports performers are not making a living, and there's industries that are crying, and of course airlines rely on sports events. But I think sports, it's fascinating. Like, non-sports people are dying because there isn't sport to watch on TV. But we can just do other things. So for example, the whole global sports industry, I mean, I can appreciate why people are into it, but you really ask yourself what it's based on and whether we need it. And I'll be honest, I've never been a fan of sport. I didn't hate it enough to want it to not happen. But hell, do we need it? I'm not sure. So there really are interesting questions. The amount of flying, really, because now we can all Zoom. And over how many years have I said to clients, please can't we just get on a Skype call? And clients have gone, no, I want to see you. And I've always gone, nice guy to see, but do I really have to fly? And how many flights have I gotten on in my life that I really didn't have to get onto? But people had this habit of seeing me, so they had to see me, so I had to fly. I never want to do that again, because flying is really bad. It messes up the planet, and the food is shitty.
Exactly. And all these coffee meetings that you used to go for.
Yeah.
And I usually at that saying where, most of the meetings that I'm in could have just been an email. The point of specific services, like, I don't think I will need a hairdresser again, because I found out that my wife can cut my hair perfectly fine. I think also a lot of people might be just making their own pineapple beer. So we might see a drop in beer prices going forward. So definitely a lot of changes.
SAB Miller shares. No, look, so I think I'm talking from a privileged position, and I am a person who has the privilege to access things that I don't need. So I think the impact on cities and how daily life changes for poorer people is obviously a different one, and the pressures are felt very differently. But I do think that there are just huge chunks of how we interact as global, also as nations, that are just going to change. And how many hotel nights, like the impact on hotel, the restaurants, the eating, I think there are huge shifts coming, and they're great. I think all 8 billion people are getting rained on at the moment. Okay, nobody is not getting wet. So there can be a whole lot of finger pointing about who's more affected and less affected. The fact is, all of us are going through change that none of us wanted, a fraction of people foresaw, and all of us are going to have to make adjustments. And not all of those adjustments will be bad for all of us. I think a lot of good adjustment can come out of this. I think certainly this can build really strong communities. So to get back to your question of what's going to happen in cities, I would not want to be a politician anywhere on this earth and try and win an election in the next 2 years, because communities are becoming incredibly strong through this crisis. And if we, as citizens, are aware and self-aware and use this change that we're going through, we can exert unbelievably huge and important and necessary pressure on the people who rule us and make decisions for us, whether we're poor or rich. So in fact, one of the great changes in cities can be a different level of accountability, because we don't have to take shit from the people who run our cities and our countries like we used to. We will no longer be prepared to listen, and politicians and parties and systems that rule us are going to have to deal with us in a whole other way. At the moment, we're all cooperating and trying to be reasonably good citizens, but we're not gonna I don't think across the world people are going to be passive citizens again like they were, because the consumer society makes you into a passive citizen where you ask less and less questions and take more and more for granted and buy into more and more comfort and choice. And that will have an impact on cities and how we design them and how we live together and how choices are made and who we vote for and where our money goes.
With regards to COVID-19, this pandemic, and your industry, the architectural industry, what kind of challenges are you facing there with regards to implementing your projects, perhaps, or other relevant or related challenges?
Well, unlike some other countries, or actually in quite a few countries around the world, construction has continued. I guess in theory it would be great if my construction sites also continued, but it means that some construction worker has to get into public transport, which is not safe. So it's fine for me as a company owner in architecture to say, hey, really our sites should continue, but I'm not the guy who's most at risk from this disease on a day-to-day working basis. So I think obviously we've had the impact from closure of sites. This will lead to delays. This will impact our clients. This will drive up costs. Then, of course, there have been changes in supply lines, the whole logistics thing, the whole, more than 70% of our buildings are imported from somewhere in the world. So the collapse of supply lines is a risk. You can work at managing that, but there'll be real impact. There'll be real reworking. There will be stuff that doesn't appear. So even when the lockdown is over, we will have delays from suppliers and manufacturers. And so the ripple effect from that will be negative initially. But on the positive side, I think this is a fantastic time for us to rethink where we buy our stuff from. There's really no reason for us as a country that used to be quite industrialized to import 70% of our buildings. We've become lazy as a nation, and we are not a knowledge economy in South Africa. We're not going to be a knowledge economy. So if we're not going to be a knowledge economy because we've had decades of terrible education systems, we had better join the community of nations that makes things. Even if we can't export them, we need to make things for ourselves. So one of the possible changes is changes in procurement. I honestly believe, and I've started bringing this into our office, and I'm going to start discussing it with my clients. We should really look at local procurement in a different way, because the extent to which we expose ourselves to these global threats is unnecessarily high. We obviously can't make everything, and we actually have to reindustrialize South Africa. But one of the great opportunities, I think, is for us as professionals who have partial control over where stuff comes from in our projects. I think we have a moral and social obligation to look at local procurement and to create jobs in factories in South Africa that stem this flood of unemployment that's going to come. Because the flip side is that we can keep on buying things from Turkey and China and Spain and Germany and wherever in the world, and we're just going to have higher and higher unemployment, more and more crime, more and more taxation, and more people with SASSA cards. And even that's not a solution, because you can't have large chunks of your population sitting at home doing nothing and waiting for charity from government. It's not a sustainable model. So in the short term, after COVID, there'll be a lot of social support, but we have to, as an industry, look at buying things from ourselves and making things here. And for me, as an architect active in Africa, I have to look at my Ghanaian clients and see what I can make in Ghana, and my Nigerian clients for what I can get in Nigeria, or at least in a neighboring country instead of from Turkey. So I think globally, obviously, as business recovers globally, there will be a huge push to reignite this engine of global trade. And I'm not sure I want to join me and my company to this thing. So one of the most important things is that we should not get out of bed, and I'm not going to get my company into a headspace of us getting out of bed to return things to normal as if normal was great. Normal worked, but there's no merit. We need to get back to work. We need to generate money. We need to create value. Our clients need to get back into business. But the bluntest tool, or the least intelligent way of getting back to work, is to imagine that that the path there is to get back to normal. It's only stupid people like President Trump who start narratives like that. Is get back to normal. We are back in business. America is open. Hell, I mean, it's just a stupid narrative, and it's shallow. The world has changed. It doesn't mean that everything has changed. But if we get out of bed to get back to normal, we're barking up the wrong tree.
Then just finally, if you have any words of encouragement, you sound very encouraged and very positive, but maybe there are others that are not so optimistic. Do you have any words of encouragement for them?
Look, I think at the moment, none of us know. So the encouraging thing is, I think the important thing is we are all afraid. So there's no merit in being afraid. There is no panicking, doesn't help. And you should only control the things you can control. All of us need to control the things we can control. And right now, not try and control the things we can't control. You're going to make your life miserable. Your life might already be miserable, but you're going to make your life more miserable by trying to control the things you can't control. I think we really will have to reconsider where our actual value sits as an industry. So what do I actually do, and why do people really feed me? Even rethink how we charge for our services. I think the way architects charge for services, these gazetted fee tables against building values, have been nonsense for a long time. They're indefensible. No client pays according to them. They're an antiquated joke, and I think they should go. I'm not sure whether COVID is the trigger for that, but I think how this whole institutionalization of how we as an industry earn our money, I think has been a pointless and indefensible model. And so maybe this crisis can get us to figure out how else we should argue why we should get paid what we want to get paid for our knowledge and our work. So, I mean, really, maybe some of you asked me for a word of encouragement. There's also people looking to government, going, government must do this, government must lead, government must spend money on infrastructure. As a word of encouragement, I would say, don't look to government. Our government in South Africa has no tax revenue and its reserves have been stolen. So as a word of encouragement, it may sound hard. In this darkest hour, as a professional architect, don't look to government. Government has no means to help you. Because how? With what tax revenue is government going to trigger a massive infrastructure spend? There is no money for that stuff. And if we make money, it's going to come from debt. So we should collectively not look at government to do things for us as architects. I think maybe government should do run feeding schemes. But as a word of encouragement, we need to look at business and our ability to sustain ourselves and not expect government to do it. Because if they fail, we're going to look pretty stupid. I don't know if that's encouraging, but I think, and for the rest, look at your moral compass. Our values, our individual values as individual people and our humanity is being tested. And we need to be great people in the immediate future before we are great architects again. And to be curious, we need empathy. As individuals, we need empathy, not compassion, empathy, the ability to feel for others. And we need curiosity. We need to really want to know what this change can bring.